So now he is here being comforted, and you are in anguish. And besides, there is a great chasm separating us. Anyone who wanted to cross over to you from here is stopped at its edge, and no one there can cross over to us." The rich man said, "Please, Father Abraham, send him to my father's home. For I have 5 brothers, and I want him to warn them about this place of torment, so they won't have to come here when they die." But Abraham said, "Moses and the prophets have warned them. Your brothers can read their writings anytime they want to." The rich man replied, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone is sent to them from the dead, then they will turn from their sins." But Abraham said, "If they won't listen to Moses and the prophets, they won't listen even if someone raises from the dead." First thing you need to understand about that passage that Jesus just told us here, this is Jesus teaching, is this is not a parable. You see, a parable is where characters are never actually named. You ever notice that in parables? Characters are never actually named. It's more like they're identified as a certain man or a householder or a man. But they're never actually given a name. Whenever Jesus teaches in parables, he doesn't give specific characters names. Whenever Jesus talks about real, actual things that have happened, he gives names. So this is an event that Jesus is talking about that has actually taken place. Now, it gives us the best description of what Sheol or Hades is like. You notice that they talked about going to be with Abraham. Not going to be with God, not going to be with the Father, not going to be with Jesus, but going to be with Abraham. And you notice that they talked that the rich man went to the place of torment and Lazarus went to the place of comfort. But yet, you'll notice that they could interact. But that there was this thing, this pit that separated them so they could not cross over to each other. It's a beautiful explanation that Jesus gives us here of what Hades was like and the separation of paradise, the pit, not being the pit of fire, but just a bottomless pit, and torment. Both men went to Hades, but not the same part. You see, there's 3 compartments in Hades in Old Testament times. The first compartment is what they call Abraham's bosom. Yes. The thing that separates the paradise from the torment is called the Great Gulf Fixed. And then the third place, the place of torment. Jesus lays all of that out for us in the New Testament, in Luke. You see, Jesus is still alive and walking on this earth right now. So this is how things are still functioning when you die. Hades. Now let's break it down. Abraham's bosom or paradise is the place of comfort. It tells us that Lazarus was being comforted there. Verse 25 says that he is being comforted. This is the place of paradise of the Old Testament, which the souls of the righteous dead went immediately after death. There's not a waiting period. They go there immediately. The text tells us that an angel came and carried him off to Hades. Immediately. There's not like this lull where they hang out here for a little while and kind of fix things up and sort of change, alter some things that happened in life and so on and so forth. It's directly to Hades. And it says that they're with Father Abraham, not with God. See, God being in heaven, not in Hades. You got to understand, in Old Testament times, there was this gap between people and God, and that the Old Testament sacrifices only temporarily replaced that gap, it was never completely bridged, right? So people were not able to be in the presence of God because sin was never dealt with, even after death. Okay, so you got to understand that concept of why they're going to be with Father Abraham and not going to be with God in Hades, in the dwelling place where there is torment on one side and paradise on the other. Now, the other cool thing about all of this is it shows us that the torment is truly torment because they can see paradise. Can you imagine? You can see Lazarus there on Abraham's bosom, which I find really funny. You can see him there being comforted, being loved, being in the perfect place, and yet you cannot go there. That's torment. It's a horrible position to be in. Yet, you can also see when you're being comforted the people in torment. The Great Gulf fixed. There's not a whole lot of details that are given. It's an impassable gulf over which men look and converse. It's interesting that you can actually converse. In this passage, they talked, right? The rich man talked with Abraham and Lazarus. That's interesting, the simple fact that they can converse with each other, but yet be in torment and be in paradise all at the same time. Believers are separated from unbelievers, from the comfort and the torment. And some Bible teachers believe that the great gulf has no bottom to it, that is a bottomless pit, and that this could be the bottomless pit of Revelation 20, verse 3, into which the devil is cast in the very end times. Okay, some scholars believe that, some don't believe it. I don't even really care, because whatever, he's a loser. Now, the place of torment, it's interesting. Jesus gives us the most discussion about the place of torment, and I believe that that's because his sole mission was to keep you out of that place, right? He didn't want you to go there. He doesn't want you to make that choice, and so he's going to tell you about that place, and he's going to say, you really don't want to be there. So the place of torment is where we got the most teachings by Christ, and the rich man called it a place. That's very, very important to understand that the rich man called it a place, not an essence, not kind of a just something that doesn't really exist. It's literally a place. Paradise and the place of torment are literally a location, a place that the dead go. Okay, that's important to understand in the theological concepts about this. Verse 22 says that he was buried. Verse 23 says, and his soul went to the place of torment. That gives us the teaching that there is no waiting period, that he goes directly. He's buried and he goes, that he's taken by an angel to the place of torment. Verse 23 suggests that the rich man is conscious of what he's missed. The simple fact that he can look from torment into paradise. So, I mean, to me, that's the ultimate torment. Okay, so you're now separated from paradise, but yet you can see it, and you see the people that made it there, and you can only converse with them. You can't ever get there. To the point where the rich man said, you got to go back. You got to tell all my loved ones. You got to tell them about this, because they'll believe it if a dead dude comes and tells them. And I love that Abraham says, nah, it's given to them. They have the writings of the prophets. They have every opportunity to read and respond. This means that one of those tortures is seeing the believers and being constantly reminded of what he missed due to his rejection of God. Now, let's bridge this into the New Testament context, right? The Old Testament calls it Sheol. The New Testament calls it Hades, or Gehenna is different, okay? Gehenna is the actual fire pit, okay? That's the actual hell at the end times that I taught about last week, okay? Where we're given the imagery. Christ's resurrection, Christ is actually victorious over Hades, okay? So Christ's resurrection is now the point where everything changes about where the dead go. So what I just taught you about the three facets of Hades has now actually been conquered by Christ because of his death and his resurrection.